Welcome to Around the Drafting Table, where we talk about topics that are top of mind for homeowners looking to design a new home. I am Kory Cox, the Oxford architect. Our topic today is interior design. There are hundreds of decisions to make throughout a design project. A high-quality interior designer is an essential resource to guiding you through all finish selections at the right times so that you never feel overwhelmed. Joining us today, we have premier interior designer Stacey Graves from Edit Design House. Recently, they had a project in the Northern Wasatch Parade of Homes and won the Best of Salt Lake City 2 years in a row for 2024 and 25, in addition to an award for Best of Davis County. Stacey, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
To begin, tell us about you and Edit Design House.
Yeah, so Edit Design House, we are 13-year-old company. We've been around for a long time. It's my baby. I grew it from the ground up after many years in the industry and wanting to be able to reach out directly to clients and be able to help them one-on-one. And now my team has grown. We've got a team of 7 of us who love helping and changing lives through interior design. That's kind of our mantra here. And where the name came from, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, is Edit Design House being kind of like if you were an author and you were to write a story or a book, you would send it to a publishing house. And through editing, they would help you tell the very best version of your story. And likewise, we do the same with people and their spaces. I fully believe that your space does have the power to influence how you live. So whether you live in a shoebox or your favorite place in the world, those are going to influence how you live your life. So we love taking and editing your space in our design house and making it the very best version of your life and the very best version of your story so you can kind of march forward authentically to everything that you've hoped and wished and dreamed for yourself.
Yeah, this is such a wonderful idea. Everyone has sort of a narrative for what they think their house should be, and you're here
Yeah,
to edit and add all the correct punctuation where it's supposed to be.
I love
Um,
that.
what type of projects do you guys work on?
Yeah, so we love doing a custom home, dream home, something that you've kind of had in your mind that you're trying to aspire to. Again, it's supposed to be this highest and best version of your life. Not to say that we don't work on other homes as well, but a dream home is a very good fit for us. We love doing a ground up, something that has a lot of decisions to be made. Likewise, we also do major remodels. So major being kind of 5 rooms plus all the way to your whole house down to the studs. We love helping homeowners be able to make all those decisions so that the home they get on the back end is what they were dreaming of and expecting and hoping for on the front end.
Hmm. Are there any out of the ordinary benefits that owners get from working with at a design house?
Yeah, one of my very, very favorite things that we do for our clients is when everything is all buttoned up and tied in a nice bow, we send in a professional photographer and take stunning, beautiful photos, not just of the rooms, but also these kind of amazing emotional moments in the home and that kind of share the heartbeat of the home. And we actually produce a custom keepsake magazine, so kind of like
Hmm.
an Elle Decor, an Art Digest for each of our clients. So they get their very own copy. That cover to cover is all about their home, and it really highlights and recognizes this moment in the time where everything was exactly the way that they wanted to be. Of course, any home in any magazine is still going to have real life happen after the photos are taken. And so we fully expect that your home will be a living, breathing part of your family. But it's also really important and exciting for us to help you remember and recognize this moment in time where everything was just as you liked it, and remembering that you do live in your dream life in this space. So that's a
Hmm.
really, really fun gift that we give to our clients. We send them lots of copies so they can share with their mom and grandma and neighbor. And it's so fun for them to celebrate exactly all the time and energy and effort that goes into building a custom home.
Yeah, this is a fantastic takeaway. I think you shared a copy with me a couple of months back. Really lovely to see that kind of takeaway for owners that they can return to years down the road and remember what the design process was like.
Love it.
Um, what are some regular challenges you face as an interior designer when working on statement homes?
For sure. I think one of the biggest thing is it used to be that people didn't have a lot of ideas when it came to how they wanted their house to look. And now there's almost this overflow of ideas where there are so
Hmm.
many different places where people can look for inspiration. So honing in and making selections and narrowing up what ends up going in the house versus what the client has kind of floating around in their mind. That's not necessarily a challenge for us, but it is one of our big goals that we're trying to achieve. And at the end of that, once we are able to percolate through all of and sift through all of these different things that the client has have been dreaming of in their mind. What we're trying to do is help them make a decision that they feel comfortable moving forward with. So that's probably one of the biggest things that we kind of bump into is helping them feel the confidence to move forward and say, okay, of all the things I saw, this is how I like it, this is how I love it, and this is where I feel settled, and I'm going to sleep easy at night knowing that this is how the home is going to be built. So we actually do have a lot of great tools that we use to help people visualize how the end result will be. And, we'll do drawings and renderings and different things that help them visualize.
Hmm.
And we love the fact that they can say, here's 5 ideas that I had or 5 concepts that I had, ready, set, go, put it into a design. Once we render it out, it's sometimes a surprise to them that they don't like that space or that they do love that space. And we find that it's so
Hmm.
much easier to change it on a rendering than
Yep.
waiting till the home is built and then having to tear things out. So budget-wise, it's super helpful knowing ahead of time. And I think it's also great that the contractor is going to know what they're trying to build, that it's all on the same page of what we think is going to be built and what the client thinks is going to build. So there aren't any surprises on the back end, but that's huge for
Yeah.
us, being able to make
Yeah.
decisions.
Same for me. Surprises. Everyone loves a surprise, for a holiday or a birthday.
Yeah.
I do not like surprises in
Yeah,
building design.
for
I never
sure.
want to be surprised. I never want my owners to be surprised. And so all of our communication tools, like you use, are very much geared around ensuring that people know exactly what's going to happen, so that when they
Yeah.
walk out on site, they're just like, "Oh yeah, that's what I expected."
Yes. I mean, it's
That's what I
always
want to hear.
better in person, right? The
Hmm.
real thing is always better than the rendering. So there's still that level of excitement and intrigue, of course, but
Yep.
you don't want it to be different than what you thought. I mean, better than what you thought is always welcome.
Right. We do welcome that.
Yeah.
What do you really want homeowners to know about your work before they start working with you?
Sure. One thing that always comes up is there's a cost associated with design. Like anything, uh, obviously it's kind of a luxury service. It's something that you wouldn't necessarily spend money on if you're picking your barn or your shed in your backyard. You want to save it and make sure that it makes sense for the project that you're working on. And if you ever have any questions on that, you can always call and ask us, hey, is this project a good fit for you? But one thing is that you really do get the value back from any investment that you put in on design services. So
Hmm.
expect that there is a cost associated with it, but just like you wouldn't want to DIY your own dental, you would put your hands into an expert who is trained in it. Same thing
Hmm.
for us. It really does make life a whole lot easier being able to make the hundreds of decisions, thousands of decisions that go into a home, and also having that expectation, like we chatted about, of you go into your home and it's exactly what you wanted and you love it. We often find that our very best client tends to be someone who tried to build a house previously and had a poor experience with the end result, right? They picked everything
Yeah.
that they thought they loved. And at the end of the day, they walked in and they think, I don't like it at all. And how could it possibly be that I don't like this at all when I picked all the things I loved? So that's one thing, is that value really does come in the peace of mind of knowing that you're going to love everything. Also, there's a huge education component of it when you're asking different things like, well, should I use this wall covering or this carpet or
Hmm.
this furniture? There's a huge education that we give to our clients and be able to help them understand the why behind a lot of the products. And then at the end of the day, just knowing that your home is not going to only be great on the day that it's finished, but on into this longevity of however long you're going to live there, you know that you're still going to love it for a long time. So it is an upfront investment, but it does last for decades after.
Yeah. Some ideas in there we're going to touch on with some of our questions later, so I'm excited to get to those. But for the moment, we'll just move on to the next question. When is the best time in the life cycle of a project for you to get involved? When should your first conversation with the homeowner happen?
Yeah, ideally, it's right during that crucial time where they're meeting with the architect. A lot of times, the architect sits down with them, and there's this kind of roadmap and plan of on how it goes. And I think sometimes with our clients, they have a hard or challenging time articulating exactly what they want with an architect. Now, of course,
Hmm.
there are rare cases where the first thing the architect puts down, the client is in love with and happy with, and that's so great. We love when that
Hmm.
happens, which is probably pretty rare. But we love being involved right in that moment as well, not only for helping them make any adjustments to the architectural plans or helping them voice their opinion while those plans are being produced, but also building that relationship with the architect, because for the rest of the project, there are going to be parts where we are both working on it. And so it's nice to have that initial foundation where they still own a lot of those details and the general massing of the house and all of those things came from their brain and is their baby a little bit, but it's also this collaborative goal where we're trying to all achieve the same thing. So building that rapport as soon as possible is really great.
Yeah.
Not to say that we haven't had projects come on later in the game, but I do think it helps us give the client the attention that they deserve and require, the sooner the better.
Hmm.
Especially if they have a quick turnaround, it's nice to have as much cushion up front as possible so that they're not having to make decisions on things based on availability. They really do get to choose the gamut of the materials and the aesthetics that they really, really do want and not be limited by, hey, this is the only stuff that's available right now. So sooner the
Yeah.
better. But
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I like to bring in all of my extended design team for individual meetings with homeowners during schematic design. Right
mhm,
after programming, we're going into all the sketching components. And maybe halfway through that process, I like to set up meetings so that my owners can meet you, and have an hour-long one-on-one conversation so that you can lay out, here's what you can expect from the interior design process. And it gives everyone a chance to develop rapport and puts in the minds of the owners things that they should perhaps be thinking about
mhm.
while we're still in schematic design and it's easy to make changes. And I think one of the really good examples of that is recently I had the opportunity to tour Rio Stone here in Salt
Yeah.
Lake. They've opened a new kind of warehouse area and they have a lot of beautiful stones.
Hmm.
Some of them very unique. They had one that was made of petrified wood that
Yeah.
thin slices had been taken and then it was arranged kind of artfully in a large panel and then they used resin to put it all together. And so, that one panel, it's a pretty expensive piece of stone if you
Hmm.
compare it to, just a cut piece of natural stone of a different kind. But that would be an opportunity to create a really unique focal point in a home. And if you're
Absolutely.
not involved early enough to point out some of those opportunities get missed.
Right. And I think applying different things in different applications, right? Of course, you could put that on a countertop and it would be interesting and dynamic and
Hmm.
noteworthy. However, if we had it early enough on, that could be some sort of water feature that you see right when you walk in the
Hmm.
front door, or
Yeah.
different things that are really those wow special moments that do have to be thought of ahead of time.
Yeah, that one specifically, I think would be great as a wall piece with some light behind it, in an entry
Yes,
hall or whatever. Really good opportunities.
absolutely. I love that.
Interior design can often be the difference between a home that costs $400 a square foot and one that costs $1,000 a square foot. The
Yep.
reality is, when we're talking about like windows or the structural package, we can make some small changes here and there that can slide the cost up or down a little bit, but
Hmm.
without removing major features of a home or large bits of square footage, we really can't change the cost that much. But when
Yeah,
it comes to interior design, things come in a very large range. So how do
absolutely.
you help guide owners in their decision making to ensure that we keep everything within the stated budget?
Yeah. On that note, I think a really important reason of why we like to get involved with the architect right up front as well is understanding that overall budget for the client is so, so important. Where I think that square foot number does give you, as an architect, this initial goal of, okay, if this is your number, if this is how much you have to spend on the home, how many square feet can you get, right? And I think sometimes people would rather have a big, giant, simple house or maybe a little bit smaller, complex, detailed house. And
Hmm.
being able to understand that right at the get-go is so important. One of the things that's the most heartbreaking is when the client has really gone in and detailed and designed and so much emotion and time and love put in with the architect, and they're getting to the end and they're bringing us on and they realize that that budget is stretched too thin, and now they have
Yep.
this incredible home but there's not enough to go around for these
Hmm.
spaces that they had imagined. So if they would have taken out a couple of rooms that were unnecessary, or made the massing and made the shape and sizing of the room a little bit different and a little bit more thoughtful and intentional, and just been a little more conservative on sizing, then they could have still had that high level of detail. So I think that overall budget is really, really big. And while I do think per square foot is also super important because there are a lot of inferred things, right? Like a house that's $400 a square foot may not have some of the features that one that's $1,000 a square foot.
Yep. Absolutely.
But I do think overall budget is huge to consider, and being able to understand the level of detail that goes into there. some of the things to just consider and think about when you're thinking about how far my budget is going to stretch is just simple things like wall covering, the amount of millwork and trim. So, meaning like woodwork that goes up on walls, like a wainscoting or feature walls, different things like that. The amount of cabinetry and built-ins that go into a home are going to make a huge impact on the budget of the house because they often have countertops as well. So, it's not just the built-ins, but also the countertops and the hardware and all of the electric and all of that that goes along with it. Also light fixtures. So when we get to kind of more of that decorative level, light fixtures can be a massive swing where you can add one or two zeros to the package depending on which light fixtures you're
Yep.
choosing. So I think that's all important things to consider. And if you've fallen in love with those high-end things, maybe you need to really seriously consider the size of the house. Or
Hmm.
if you're super, super locked in on the size of the house, then we may need to make some compromises on some of the level of those finishes if we're trying to balance a budget.
Yeah. I think one of the central ideas in what you're talking about there is the idea of, do we want a smaller house that's feature rich or a very
Hmm.
large house that has pretty basic features and materials? Which is a really important conversation and one that I like to have with my owners right up front as well. So hopefully that makes your job easier when you do come on board.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think beyond just the home itself, considering that if you want to furnish that home, how much of an investment do you need to furnish X amount of square footage versus
Hmm.
different and that level of finishes as well, right? I mean,
Yep.
you can't necessarily very easily add or subtract square footage later on. And I know it's a little easier to add and subtract furniture later on, but that grand investment, right, at the time when you're building the home, if you can get as much of it planned and prepped and finalized right in that moment, that's going to represent years of not having to think of it again and come up with a new budget again and starting over. So being
Hmm.
able to understand how far that budget gets you, not only in the home, but in the furniture and decor is really important as well.
Yeah. When I first start to talk budget with people, it's often not broken down, right?
Hmm.
They just have you just like, oh, I have this much money to my building project,
Yeah.
but you have to pay your entire design team.
Hmm.
Maybe half of the cost goes to land.
Yeah.
Then there are, land impact fees or city permit fees. The contractor has their overhead, which is built into the construction cost. And then
Hmm.
you have FF&E, right? Any equipment, furniture that's going to come in after the build is completed. And so you sort of have to take the budget and then break it up into each of
Yeah.
those components. And then eventually you arrive at, what do I have for the actual build of the home? And it's a much smaller number than
Yeah.
the overall number.
Yeah. I do love
So,
that you think about that though, because it's the most heartbreaking thing when the client goes into this home with an expectation of what their dollar is going to get.
hmm.
And oftentimes they don't fully understand where that budget has been cut off until they're deeper in the process and they have to make some compromises that they wouldn't have had to make if it was planned appropriately at the beginning. So I love that you're thinking about all those things right up front. It's maybe like a less exciting number to begin with than
Yeah,
the original number that they've thought, but it's also so much better to go in eyes wide open and say, okay, if it's this much instead of this much, now we can know and we can spend to the full expanse of the budget that's realistic and get everything that we wanted rather than thinking we're going to get everything we wanted and then being surprised and disappointed.
yeah, absolutely. So, with all of that kind of context, what do you normally see as the main budget busters? Where are clients making mistakes that create issues with the budget?
Yeah, I mean, one of those is wallpaper. I think wallpaper should be used, and I love it, and I think it's so charming. I do think people fall in love with the idea of wallpaper, but it's not
Hmm.
necessarily something that's budgeted in when they get their construction bid.
Yeah,
Light fixtures is another one of those where you have this idea, you think, well, I'm building a multi-million dollar home. And these are obviously the lights that we're going to be putting in the home. And then when you find out how far your budget stretches, it can be really disappointing.
yeah.
So being able to understand what those real numbers are around light fixtures, those numbers can go so quickly. Those budgets disappear so quickly. Cabinetry is another one of those, the number and size of the built-ins that you have
Hmm.
can be a
Yeah.
huge impact on the budget. So again, that is one gift that we do give to our clients is when they come to us with their construction budget, we can very easily look, it's not down to the penny, but we can very easily look and see what some of those budget allowances are when they're understanding
Hmm.
their construction bid and say, hey, just so you know, this is a number that can be achieved on XYZ category, but it's not up to caliber of what you're telling us. So you either need to make a compromise in how much budget you allow for it, or being able to understand that you're not necessarily going to get all of the pieces that you're hoping to get.
Yeah. I've had contractors on the show before, and one of the things we talk about is, bringing them in earlier in the process, either a
Mhm.
contractor or a cost estimator,
Yes.
because either one is going to provide service to allow us to look at the full budget, break it down into all the little categories, and
Yeah.
create an allowance for them. And that's going to help guide a lot of the decision making.
Absolutely. And that's helpful for us because our goal is always to honor the budget. So
Hmm.
if it's been broken down into those parts and pieces, it's nice to say, okay, you asked to spend a little bit more over here, but now we understand that we can save a little bit over there. So that's part of where your investment does pay for itself, is we're helping you be really strategic about how your budget is spent.
Yeah. So what parts of the home do you recommend spending more of a premium for longer lasting materials that are going to age well?
I do think this is a little different than we have previously discussed, but cabinetry is one of those things too that will either hold up and wear beautifully or start to break down and lose functionality over time very quickly,
Hmm.
even when you have pretty low-end cabinetry. So especially when it comes to like kitchen and great room and main areas that are getting a lot of traffic and a lot of use, make sure
Yeah.
you get good quality cabinetry on those. I know it can be a hard pill to swallow when you're looking at those numbers, being able
Hmm.
to see and understand what those numbers are for a full build. But I do recommend putting in good quality pieces that are going to hold up, especially if you've got kids or a lot of people that are going to be experiencing the house through entertaining or different things. That's huge. Um, and just good finishes that hold up. Light fixtures are one of those that can, I think, light fixtures can take a whole dramatic approach on the look of the home. And
Hmm.
in some areas, you can get a really great piece that's a great look-alike. And it's important to spend really well on a couple of key areas. And I think you can save in a handful of other areas as well. So again, there's some strategy around it. And that's one of the things that we do with our clients is say, hey, if this is where we're at on the quality and the price and the value of the home, here's where you'd want to spend a little bit of extra and get those nice, good looking pieces that will function well and give you that air of value and quality. And then some of these other areas we can help you save.
Yeah.
So overall, you still walk in and get that feel of like, wow, this thing is so nice. This home is so well done. That's huge.
Yeah. Your point about cabinetry, I think, is a very interesting one, and it brings to mind for me, this concept. Anything that's going to have an operation to it
Mhm.
is maybe where you spend more money, right? So
Yeah.
cabinet doors have hinges, the drawers have slides, doors throughout the home have hinges and handles that need to be turned. And so would you agree then that
Yeah.
spending your money on those elements so that it always feels really good and it's robust even after thousands or tens of thousands of cycles?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a very classic example is like the pocket door. I think all of us have
Hmm.
this idea that a pocket door is a terrible thing to interact with, and that's because people aren't using necessarily the best hardware that they can because nobody wants to spend X amount of money on a pocket door.
Yep.
But if there's an instance in your home where it needs to happen and it helps with the flow and everything about the home, spend the money to get the hardware that the pocket door is going to function in all of the proper ways. And that pocket door is not going to be a thorn in your side. So, really, really good point on something that moves and shakes. Same goes for furniture and decor. We may talk about a little bit of this later, but when it comes to something you're going to sit on, like a sectional or a sofa or a chair, you're going to get up and down, especially in your main areas. Get a
Yeah.
nice, good quality piece. Be comfortable with spending a little bit more on a handmade piece that's going to last for a long time versus a side table whose job is to look great and hold up a lamp.
Hmm.
Let's make sure that those pieces that are getting a high amount of interaction are going to be robust and last over time.
Okay. A really good thought there. Conversely, where do you recommend saving money?
Yeah.
By specifying more value materials.
Sure. And I think this is one of my favorite things too, is we do like to play a little bit of the game of high and low. So we were talking about light fixtures. So in those main areas like an entry, a dining room, a piano room, something that's going to get seen really well, kitchen pendants, those things, it's nice to spend a little bit more on light fixtures, but then we can be really strategic perhaps in the kids' rooms and some of those other bonus areas of the home, light fixtures don't necessarily need to be so stunning. They can be interesting and dynamic, but we can definitely save a lot on light fixtures in some of those secondary spaces. Same goes for artwork. You want some really great statement pieces in key areas of the home, but you can save in some of those corridors and hallways. You don't want them to feel empty and naked and not addressed, but they don't have to
Hmm.
be the nicest pieces in the world. So those are kind of a couple on that top layer of the decorating kind of layer. Some of the other things can also go when you're talking about tile, some other flooring materials as well. So perhaps you want some really nice, good quality tiles in the primary suite, or if you've got tile in your kitchen or entry or mudroom, those are nice areas to have the beautiful looking things. But in your guest bathroom, you can still pick a great looking porcelain, which is a high quality material. But if you
Hmm.
looked closely, you could tell it's not real marble or something kind of like that.
Right.
So those are great areas where you can save on tile. We even get into like a real wood or an engineered wood versus an LVP. There's kind of a few different levels on that. And a lot of times people, even in a really nice home, will be putting an LVP on that lower level because not only is it a whole lot more price conscious, it also has some good functionality where if water were ever to get in, you're not going to end up with some of the inherent challenges that you would with a natural material. So
Yeah.
definitely if budget is a concern, again, we're able to help you kind of play that game of high and low and where to use the nice materials and where to save for something that just looks great. And, you may have to adjust over time.
Okay. Some really good conversation around budget there. Let's shift the conversation a little bit into kind of the philosophy of design. There's an interplay between light, sound, and visual aesthetic. And that's what takes good architecture to great. And so we'll take those ideas kind of one at a time.
Okay.
So whether we have a dedicated acoustician on a project or it's just me working on, shaping sound within the different spaces of the home, what level of coordination do you do with acoustics to ensure perfect compatibility between acoustical concerns and the selected aesthetic for a space?
Yeah, I love that this is something you think about. Not every architect thinks about. And so I do think it really affects the overall quality of how you live life in the home. So I love that this is a topic that's at the forefront of your mind. There are, for us, we don't have quite as much education around general acoustics. However, we do have a lot of good tools and things that we use that come into play when we're designing a space. So, for instance, in a theater, acoustics are massively important.
Hmm.
And I do think materials have come a long way. I think you have come to expect in a theater that you would see certain types of materials. And I think because of the functionality of that room, we're okay with it. We're okay where you may not want to necessarily see some of those other materials in other areas of the home. But specifically in a theater, it's nice to be able to know that we can introduce those materials. They don't just have to look a certain way, they're also doing a function. And the experience of a theater with good acoustics versus poor acoustics, nobody cares how it looks if it's a terrible experience in there. So we're
Right.
highly open to being educated on some of those things. We love incorporating and having those materials placed appropriately. And I do love that materials have come a long way. There's so many acoustic materials that are aesthetic now that we're able to utilize in certain places, especially like that. We also love considering bedrooms. I think you want to feel it a certain way in a bedroom. The general sound quality is hugely affected by how you're going to feel in that space. So we've done
Hmm.
some fun things over the years. These can be expensive things, but one project, we actually upholstered the walls in the primary suite, and that was the greatest acoustics that I've ever had in a bedroom. You walked in there, and it just felt like this whole room was giving you a giant hug. And that was such a cool space. I
Yeah.
think if you want to feel a certain way in any room, you would love it to be your bedroom. So, huge consideration. And like I said, that's one of the reasons we love working with an architect from the very beginning is if we're putting in something that we think looks great and you have a little red flag in your mind saying, hey, that's great, but this is something that we're trying to achieve in that space. We love having open conversations about that.
That effect that you talk about in that bedroom, I love that idea. And I did have an owner recently that wanted a very similar, impact in the
Hmm.
room. But every space within a home has a different kind of level of acoustics that we want to work on. And
Hmm.
for me, my favorite parts of architecture are actually the unseen elements, right?
Love.
We all love aesthetics and making things look nice is a huge part of what we do. But for me, acoustics and lighting and thermal comfort are what really separates good architecture from poor
Yeah.
architecture. Okay, so let's talk about lighting next. And kind of the same idea here. What do you expect lighting design to highlight when you're looking at a space? Or put differently, are there things, materials, features, focal points that you prioritize highlighting when working with the light design?
Yeah, sure. I think we talk about decorative lighting being kind of like the jewelry on top. So there's definitely just aesthetically a vibe that you're going to get based on the overall layout of the piece itself, the fixture itself. However, one thing to consider is the type of light that it casts and what direction it casts it in. For instance, if you have this really great lantern, based on the structure of the lantern, you may have some shadow lines and some different things that are going to be happening. So how do you address some of those things if that becomes a concern? We had years ago we had a powder bath that had a really stunning fixture in it, and it was great, but it didn't actually produce a lot of light. And so some of
Hmm.
the things that we needed to do were add can lights, even though it was a teeny tiny room and there was a light fixture in there and a vanity a mirror light as well. We also had to have cans in that light just in that room so that there was enough ambiance to be able to see yourself in that space.
Yeah.
It was still kind of a moody, there was a goal, right? There was a goal of how you want to feel in that bathroom. And it's not necessarily the same goal that I want to feel when I'm getting ready in my own bathroom. I need some
Hmm.
task lighting. I need some utilization of how my light works in those other spaces. This one was primarily for aesthetics, but you still wanted people to be able to see themselves in the mirror, and you still wanted to be able to
Yep.
see like where the soap is and where the towel is and functionally be able to use that space. So that's really important for us. One of the other things we love to just highlight are some of the decorative pieces that we tend to be really thoughtful about with clients. So artwork. We love doing a decorative art light, not everywhere, but on a couple of key pieces that they've intentionally chosen, perhaps spent a little bit of extra expense on. There's nothing better than seeing a great piece of art with the art light and everything feels so curated and collected and being able to celebrate all the time and energy and resource that went into the selection of that moment. So that's a huge one for us, being able to highlight artwork as well. One of our other favorite things to do with lighting is just create a lot of layers. So in a
Hmm.
space,
Yep.
great room, you're going to have your overhead light, you're going to have some accent lighting, perhaps there's some lighting on the built-ins and some different details there, lamp light, all of those different things are going to help enhance the mood and the ambiance of the space.
Okay, fantastic. Next, let's address indoor air quality. As designers, we have a responsibility to our clients to provide spaces that support long-term health and wellness.
Hmm.
One component of this is selecting materials that are low in VOCs, which is
Hmm.
volatile organic compounds. If anyone's ever had, like new paint smell or new carpet smell,
Hmm.
which is enjoyable on a certain level, but that's actually bad for you. We don't want those
Right.
things.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and then there's a whole list of materials called red list materials, which we try to completely avoid. Formaldehyde being one example, but that's very common in many adhesives
Yeah.
used for various finishes, which we might be best specifying. So, what are some materials that you see commonly used that you recommend avoiding in designs, and what is your preferred alternative?
Sure. I mean, I do feel very blessed to live in a time where this is a question that comes up and this is something that people are trying to address. So, paint you mentioned is one of those huge ones where you can get a low or a no VOC paint, just meaning that, for those of us who are not in the industry, you don't get that off gassing, you don't get that smell over time, which, the smell is one thing, but what that smell is telling you is that there are chemicals that are leaching into your air and it's unhealthy to breathe it. And so, being able to choose a low or a no VOC paint that's not going to leach chemicals into your air and your lung passageways and all of those things, that's important
Hmm.
to know that it potentially could cost you a little bit more in selecting that paint, but there's no difference in the level of color and the quality of paint. You can still get a
Yep.
really, really good. There may be a little bit of a cost associated with it, but I think that it's worth it, especially long term, knowing that some of these things can off gas for 10 plus years. You just want to be mindful that this is a choice that you're making up front that will affect you for a long time. Another space that comes up with this often is a gym floor. So a lot of
Yep.
the old gym floors do have off-gassing. I myself have had an instance where I worked out at a new gym and the floor was brand new and the floor itself, I mean, you walked in and you smelt the floor and I had
Hmm.
like chemical rashes on my hands and legs from just being in that space because my body wasn't used to that barrage of chemicals. So my
Yeah.
body is telling me like this is an unhealthy environment to be in. So that's a huge one as well. Yeah, I think those are really big ones when it comes to air quality. And I do feel, like I said, again, very fortunate that there are easy alternatives. So a gym floor, there are tons of different options of something that even has a similar look and feel if you prefer. Or there has been so much creativity around materials and how and where they're used that you can have a gym floor with an entirely different look out of an entirely different material. And that's kind of a fun way to experience your home gym versus a commercial gym as well.
Yeah. Let's pivot the conversation a little bit and talk about psychology, and specifically the psychology of calmness, of retreat, of serenity, texture and color, bright and vivid or muted and neutral. All of these characteristics interplay between each other. Everyone can relate with the experience of being in a space that kind of overwhelmed the senses. Too much light, too much color, too much noise. Even
Mhm.
thermal extremes can contribute to that feeling. A home should be a place of calm retreat, I think, for most people. Do
Yeah.
you have rules of thumb that help you elicit certain emotional responses when an owner walks into a room?
Yeah, one of the things we talk about with our clients, of course, is overall mood and ambiance and how they want to feel in their space.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of owners have this general, either they want to feel kind of invigorated and excited in their space or calm and peaceful in their space. However, sometimes they have different rooms where they want to have different feelings as well. So if this is going to be perhaps an entertaining space where we want people to feel excited and energized and build the momentum of having people and energy and texture and that kind of space, we're going to address it a little bit differently than perhaps like their primary bath or their primary bedroom or a nursery or a kids' playroom. So there are
Hmm.
definitely different times where we upplay or downplay the level of energy visually that goes into a room. But again, I still, despite all of that, I still love to play the game of high and low. So if I have a client who loves neutral things, I want to put neutral things in their home and I want it to be a calm and serene space, but also I don't want it to be a sleepy space where there's nothing interesting to look at. So
Yep.
I do like to bring a level of dynamic into that, whether it's with like a soft, gentle color or some dynamic texture that's going into it or something on a material or a height or a dimension. We like to play that game of high and low where, hey, everything is chill over here, but we're going to add a little bit of drama just to help you appreciate the chill. It's almost adding a little bit of salt to a cookie dough makes the sweetness better
Yep.
or some other type of recipe, right? That's kind of how we like to play. And again, too, if you have total chaos in a room, it's not going to feel exciting to you. It's going to feel like a barrage of energy. So you want
Right.
to have enough chill things. We talk about this a lot with artwork with our clients. You don't want to have to put a piece of artwork on every single spot on a wall or it starts to feel like a museum. So you do
Hmm.
need areas and spaces where your eye can rest. And I think when people walk into a well-designed home, they understand that this is good, but they don't always know why. So there's always a level of education when our clients are saying, well, can you add this, add this, add this? Do we need something there? Do we need something there? You don't
Hmm.
always have to say yes because they're asking for it. Sometimes the answer is you don't want something there, and here's why. And
Right.
so they don't want to walk away feeling like their house wasn't fully thought through and everything wasn't addressed, but they're going to have peace of mind once they're educated. Like, oh my gosh, I realized that I don't need a piece of art here. Now I can walk away understanding that my house feels done and complete. So that education can be really important.
Yeah. Sometimes the blank white wall or ceiling is the correct choice.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so you need something to balance. We also kind of say you're going to have like a star of the show in the room, and then you're going to have supporting players. So each room could have a different star. Maybe it's the light fixture, maybe it's a piece of art, maybe it's a chair or a rug.
Hmm.
So we want to have that star of the show, but we also want to have the supporting players that are there to just help elevate and complete everything.
Okay. See, I think we're running a little bit low on time. Do you have anything that you want to add about interior design and working with at a design house?
My biggest thing and my biggest takeaway is just what I kind of mentioned at the very beginning is that your space really does have the power to influence how you live. One of my very, very favorite compliments that I ever received from a client was a major remodel that they had addressed every single area in the home, but didn't change any of the walls. So, same home that they had lived in for 20 years. And after this full remodel, he came to me and he said, I just can't believe that this is the life I get to live. I can't believe that this is the place
Hmm.
that is mine, that this is the home that I get to live in. And of course, the irony is that he's already lived in that home for 20 years, but
Right.
it's now this thing that allows him to stand taller and be more confident in his work and his life and his socials and all of those different areas where he's outputting his energy. He has a little bit more of a support system because it's very authentic to how he wants to live his life. So that's one of our favorite goals and our favorite gifts that we give our clients is being able to live this higher, more authentic life because of the space that they reside in.
Yeah, I think that story is a perfect example of, you know, telling people if you're in a space and you've been considering a project, take the jump. You'll be
Yeah.
so happy that you did. When the project is over and your space is so much better, and you don't want to look back after 20 years and go, "Oh, why didn't I do that 20 years
Yeah,
ago?"
for sure.
Jump in, do it.
Yes, for sure. And I
And
think
we're
if
here to
you're
help.
really, yeah, I think if you're super mindful about what you're selecting as well, trends don't have to affect it. It's going to be your favorite things, it's going to be your favorite place. And so that just lives on forever. So I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, we didn't touch on the idea of trendiness versus timelessness today. I think that'd be a very interesting conversation, perhaps for another time.
Love it.
But it's been great talking to you. I think we're out of time now. Stacy, thank you for joining the conversation around the drafting table today to provide your thoughts on interior design.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great time.
Okay, until next time, for everyone listening in, get in touch with Oxford Architect so we can dream together.
Love it.